Hey guys, welcome to Talk Tennis. 2022 is wrapping up. It has been quite the year for tennis, and we have had some absolute amazing podcast episodes. While they all hold a special place in my heart, and I appreciate everyone that has been on the podcast this year and years past, I just gathered a few of your favorite and my favorite moments from this year. So we're going to be taking a little listen into a couple of the top episodes from 2022. And as you guys know, there was a lot of stuff happening in tennis. One of the biggest things, I think, though, as far as rackets go, was we got to see a brand new Babolat Pure Aero. And I had a chance to talk to Babolat all about how they create their rackets, what goes into making their rackets, all that kind of fun stuff. We had such a deep dive into the history of the Pure Aero, the players that endorse the Pure Aero. So take a listen to a little snippet of this episode and then come back and we'll check out a few more.
We are consumer centric. It's very important. And we identified this. And so we went much further than just propose a different weight and balance.
Okay.
So frames are different.
What did you guys identify as some of the things that needed to be updated for the new Pure Aero, and how does that manifest in the new lineup?
Yeah, then in the process, when we prepared the brief, so we identified, obviously, internally, and we checked some reviews. So you as we talked yesterday.
Yeah.
So we checked some reviews, and so it's important to gather all different elements from people, players, and your reviews. And so we identified some criteria to improve, like feel, for example. Mm-hmm. So we identified this. So we worked on technologies that provide a great feel. And we identified as well, for what we talked, the category of strong spinner with a natural strength. Mm-hmm. We noticed that they would expect a better power control ratio, or control power ratio. So a bit more control maybe. So that's why we worked on a specific string pattern, for example, to provide that perfect balance.
Nice.
Control power ratio, yeah.
Well, let's talk about the models. Let's start with you can tell us. You can introduce the models. This is your baby.
Yeah, I would say it's. So we are working on the 8th generation of the Pure Aero.
That's
so
crazy.
It's been a long time. Yes, almost 20 years. So it's a strong franchise.
Yes.
It's a strong franchise for Babolat. Yeah, the racket got a lot of successes, I would say, on tour and on clubs too, but
yes,
I would say the first one. Would say this one. It's this one is a kind of special because this is the model that Rafa played and won the first French Open in 2005.
Wow.
So I would say yes, everything started with this one. This one, yes, got a lot of success and got very famous.
Yes.
So it's very special.
Yeah.
I would say in the Pure Aero history. Yes. Then I see this one. This one is a model in 2013. Mm-hmm. We see the Cortex here. This one was a bestseller.
Okay. I was going to say, I remember even years after, people are still like, do you have the old APD?
Yeah. So the APD 13 was very, very good racket. I think we managed to reach the perfect, I would say, control power ratio with this racket.
Okay.
Of course, it generates spin, so we have some technologies like woofer to increase the trampoline effect. Yes, and in terms of playability, that racket was really good and cool design, and so yes, it was a bestseller.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think when people hear Aero or APD, that might be the one that they first see in their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of players are nostalgic for
yes.
this racket. Yeah. And then, I would say this one, it's the other current one, Pure Aero 2019. Mm-hmm. Very cool one. I think in that generation of racket, we integrated what we call aeromodular technology. So we integrated a plastic part
Okay.
Into the frame to reduce, I would say, frictions in the air, and so to have a racket speed and a faster swing. So we worked on this, and on this generation of racket, we worked on the string pattern too. It's a little bit more open.
Okay.
So we know it generates more power and spin. So this is part of another segment of the spin, what we call heavy spin. We'll talk maybe later about that. But yes, it's the string pattern is a bit different here, and some technologies for feel like SMAC. So the filtration of vibration, it's important too. So players still need a feedback in the hand. So we work on this to have the perfect filtration of vibrations to provide the perfect feel. So this one is doing well too.
Yeah.
It's is a very good one.
We started off 2022 with a deep dive into wheelchair tennis. As someone that's played tennis for almost 35 years of my life, I was easy to admit that I didn't know as much about wheelchair tennis as I wanted to. So I had so much fun researching, connecting, learning about wheelchair tennis, and I have such huge respect for these wheelchair athletes, but specifically the ones on the tennis court. They share our passion. They're out there grinding, and it's so cool to connect and see how talented these athletes are. So I wanted to share with you guys a snippet from my chat with Brad Parks, who is literally the founder of wheelchair tennis. Take a listen. Today's guest is, in a word, inspirational. In 2010, he was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. He's a 3-time major champion, a former world number 1, and a gold medal winner, earning all of these awards after being paralyzed at 18 years old in a skiing accident. He is known as one of the pioneers of wheelchair tennis and is one of the reasons why wheelchair tennis has become a worldwide sport. Thank you so much for joining me on Talk Tennis today, Brad Parks.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So this conversation sort of came about. I was talking to the USTA Southern section, and they have a big wheelchair tennis initiative, which I'm starting to learn more about. And I had mentioned at Tennis Warehouse, like, hey, I really want to learn more about wheelchair tennis. I think this is a cool area that we can just kind of absorb ourselves into. And your name was brought up, and Rick connected me to a mutual friend, and I got connected to you, Brad. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. So thank you for joining. And I just kind of wanted to start from the beginning. As I was doing my research, there's so much that you've done with your life. But talk to me, start from the beginning. You're a young skier growing up as a skier.
Correct. I kind of grew up playing a lot of different sports, but I really started focusing on skiing, and I love to surf too because I lived in Southern California. But skiing was certainly my love, and I chose to go to the University of Utah because I wanted to be in the snow and to ski. And there was an amateur freestyle competition circuit, I should say. And I had friends who were on the pro tour in those days. That was kind of my goal. And but I, wanted to get a degree, and so I figured that was kind of the best thing was to be there. And I was the very first competition that I was in where I over rotated a backflip and broke my back. Believe it or not, tennis was a sport that I did play, and I wasn't on the high school team or anything like that. I did have a few friends who were on the high school team, and I played with them. But it was a sport that I really wanted to get better at. Figuring in the off season when I couldn't surf or and of course couldn't ski because of the snow.
Yeah.
I wanted to really learn to be a better tennis player. So when I got hurt, I thought maybe I'd get better for months. Well, for a certain period of time, I did think, you kind of figured you're going to get better. And even though the doctor said there's no way you're going to get better, it's permanent. So I thought, if it's going to be permanent, then what am I going to do with my life? What sports can I still do? And people had mentioned basketball, and I think I had heard about that they have races, wheelchair races and things. But I thought to myself, tennis. I wonder if I could play tennis. So really, it was really in the first month when I'm in the rehab, not before I even was in rehab, when I was still in, I guess, it was out of intensive care, but it was recovering from the surgery, where they put 2 Harrington rods in your back, and it was before you even know how to use the wheelchair. It was before I even got out of bed. I started thinking about the tennis, and so it was. I just kind of wondered if it's possible, and it seemed if you could play wheelchair basketball, it seemed logical that you could play tennis. So I kind of had that on my mind. And
so essentially, was anyone playing wheelchair tennis before you kind of were like, we can do this in a wheelchair?
Well, it was right after I got out of rehab. So I spent a month in the hospital and then 3 months in rehab. And when I got out of the rehab, there was a guy there who was a wheelchair basketball player who was, teaching, how to do certain things in the wheelchair to be able to survive and get around. And, I played some hoops, and I played a couple of years of high school basketball. So I did like basketball, but I didn't know of anybody who played tennis, never heard of it, but my parents played. And it was just right after I got out of the hospital that I went out and hit with my parents, and my parents were playing, and Dad looked over at me and just, asked me if I wanted to try hitting some. And I said, yeah, sure. I'm in a hospital wheelchair with a high back and big old side guards and armrests and things. And, it was very bulky. And, but, I hit a couple of balls with it. I assume, as I recall, he fed me balls. And then we kind of hit some, and just to see what it was like. And immediately I thought, wow, I think this is something that I want to pursue a little bit and try. Then a month later, after I had to go for a checkup back at the hospital. Now, the guy who was the rec therapist, was a wheelchair basketball player, had left after I got out, and there was a new guy in there. So I went to my ward, I guess you would call it, and there were 3 or 4 guys who were that I got to know when I was in the hospital that were still there. So I just thought I'd go and visit them and see how they're doing. And one of the guys said, there's this new rec therapist named Jeff, and he's playing wheelchair tennis. And I had told this guy, I told, probably all those guys knew that I was starting to play, and, on my own. And so they thought, guy, you got to meet Jeff because he's playing. And so that was very encouraging to me to think that there's another guy who's doing this. So we became instant friends. And so it just kind of happened from there. And he was really the inspiration behind behind the first tournament.
Okay.
He told me that he was teaching a class at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, and that the next year, we became, we started hitting together and became friends. He lived in LA, I lived in Orange County, so we were an hour and a half away. But we did have the opportunity to really get to know each other, and I kind of came under his wing, so to speak. He was an excellent mentor, somebody who was instrumental, I would say, in that time of my life, as an encourager and everything else. But so this first tournament, where he was teaching a little bit, they ran a tournament, and he was the one who came up with the idea of 2 bounces.
Okay.
And he asked me about it. I remember him calling me up and saying, well, we're going to have this tournament. You got to play in it. And he said, what do you think? Should we do 1 bounce or 2 bounce? And I had kind of gone back and forth during this. This was a period of about a year now, during this period. And I had kind of gone back and forth, and I started to realize that we needed to play with 2 bounces. And again, we're in hospital wheelchairs now. He started making his own wheelchair out of a garage, and it was pretty lightweight, maneuverable, and very, very different. But he just made one for himself, and then I said, yeah, Jeff, we got to use 2 bounces. That's the way we play. And whenever I would play with friends, I'd say, hey, I use 2 bounces. I would just automatically say that.
Right.
So it was years later when it was officially approved, it was like a big deal. It's like, wow, it's part of the rules of the game.
You guys always have such amazing feedback for us, whether it's on the podcast, on some of our videos, on our message boards. So we had some fun answering some of your big questions. We love interacting with you guys about gear, and we love the questions. So keep them coming. You can always email us at podcast@tennis-warehouse.com. In this episode, Troy and I take a stab at answering some of your big gear questions. This was one of 2 of our Ask Me Anything episodes, and they proved to be very popular. So keep asking us questions and we'll keep answering them. Take a quick listen to this episode. Let's start with a question that I think a lot of people might have out there. How often should I change my grommets?
Oh,
That's a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it really comes down to it, I mean, the simple answer would just be like the functionality of the grommets. So,
Yes.
the biggest thing is, some people will wear down the bumper guard, a lot faster than others. A lot of people, whether they scrape their the top of their racket, going for volleys. Some people even like hit it when they're following through on their serve.
Right.
I don't tend to wear out my bumper and grommets too much, like just from rubbing against a court surface.
Yeah,
I know we have
racket's really nice.
but I know some people like sometimes I'd give a hard time to Jason Wong, because sometimes he'd be like even use his racket to like stop himself while he's like turning directions. I'm like,
just shaves.
You're gonna wear through that bumper fast.
Yeah.
But really what you want to be aware of is just check the bumper of the racket, especially over time. When you first get a new racket, you're usually not going to have to worry about too much, but check the bumper, and you just want to look for where the plastic meets the actual frame. Check for any of the paint wearing down, graphite exposure, like the layer underneath. And you can usually see the different layers of the paint if it starts to wear through. I know some of your old RFs had that going on where like it goes to the primer and then underneath. Yeah. So that's important for the top part of the racket, the integrity around the hoop and the bumper, but also something especially over time if you have a racket for many years is the actual little tiny grommet pieces throughout the whole part of the hoop will start to break down, and you want to check that for like little cracks.
Okay.
Because once they start the little grommet holes start cracking, the string can kind of slip through and lay up against the sharp edge of the frame, and that can cause premature string breakage. So those are the things you really want to look for. Personally, I don't have to change my grommets on my frames that often, but maybe after like a year or so, start checking. Some people will wear through the bumper really, really fast. So it just depends on how heavy duty you are and like how often you scrape your racket on volleys and stuff like that.
Okay. And one thing that I think it would be worth adding, especially we've seen like delivery issues the last few years, maybe trying to get people in the habit of buying grommets before they need them.
Yeah, I would say, maybe if you are looking to buy your rackets, if you're the type of, tournament player or whatever that buys 2 or 3 rackets at a time, when you're doing that big purchase, maybe look on the website. You're shopping hopefully from Tennis Warehouse and just see if there is inventory. Maybe get a backup or two backups. I don't think you need to get like 5 or 6. That's a little overkill unless you have a lot of frames, but maybe just a couple backup grommets if they're available. They're usually pretty cheap, under $10.
Yeah.
So probably worth it in the long run if you plan on sticking with the racket for, a few years or whatever.
I was going to go into another question, but since we're talking about old rackets, there was one that popped up. It said, I'm currently using an Aero Pro Drive GT. They got it for Christmas in 2010. So assuming it's the 2010 model, he used it for 1 tennis season in school, used it once a week for another 8 months or so, then quit. He hibernated from tennis until last June.
Nice.
And it says, I've been using it twice a week since then. My questions are, 1, do I need a new racket? I love it still, but not sure if anything happens to it if you let it rest over time. And 2, what racket would you say is similar to this? I wouldn't mind it being a little heavier. That would actually be a positive. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, now that it seems like they're getting back into tennis, playing more regularly, I mean, if they like the racket and there's no damage to it, or like we were just talking about the grommets and stuff and like scuffs to the frame or, it's breaking down the structural integrity, the racket will probably play fine as long as Usually you'd want to, if you're storing a racket, if it's sitting around for a long time, you want to keep it in an indoor climate, a temperature control.
Yeah. Don't leave it in your garage.
Yeah. You don't want to probably leave it in the garage, like inside your house, your closet, room, or whatever. It's usually fine. Definitely don't want to leave it in the trunk of your car. Just because those extreme temperature changes will have more of an effect on the inside of the racket, the fibers and stuff, and especially the strings. So it sounds like the racket's probably fine, but it definitely would be, if you're getting more serious and maybe playing more competitive matches, you might actually want to look to, upgrade it. And, we're in the business of selling rackets. So there's definitely some good choices on the market. I would definitely, Aero Pro Drive into the Pure Aero family. So you'd probably want to look at the Pure Aero. If you want a little heavier, maybe Pure Aero Tour. Most of us really like the VS, even though it's not heavier. It's a little more control and feel, and you can always customize. So that's a good place to start. But then, we have videos, what plays like a Pure Drive. We've done, other rackets that are power spin friendly. Right. And I think you've done a couple of those good ones.
And if you follow the trend of the color, that might help. If you're thinking out.
So what are you thinking?
I was thinking the Dunlop, the SX line, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
That would be another great place to start. SX 300. I really like the Tour. I think you did too, because it's kind of like the VS. It's a 98, so it's a little more control and feel. I think it's got a little more weight to it, maybe at like 305 for the Tour versus the 300 grams.
Yeah.
So those are great frames, and they're pretty comfortable too, because they have that technology, that sonic core.
Right. I actually like the SX more than I like the Pure Aero VS. Personally, I like the feel of it better.
Yeah. And then from there, the next options are obviously going to be like the Head Extreme. That's super popular on the Pro Tour nowadays, from Berrettini to Struff to all kinds of players. Our old Team Tita player Haley Carter was using it for a long time. Yeah. It's a really popular frame.
Yeah.
Little
Street I can't say her name. What does she use? Sorry, Barbara is her name.
Are you talking about Krejcikova?
Yeah, sorry.
She's an extreme user.
Her.
Yeah.
I said it so wrong. It wasn't even the right name.
No. I knew where you were going.
Who she was.
Because you got the first name right. Yeah. But Extreme's a great frame. And then from there, what are some of the other V-Core from Yonex?
For sure.
Great choices. So you have a lot to choose from. Call our racket experts, and they could definitely hook you up with like a demo order if you have that option.
2022 was filled with controversial topics, but I think the biggest one on the podcast was the great string debate. And we're talking tension, high tension versus low tension. As I mentioned on the episode, I'm usually on the wrong side of this debate. As someone that prefers a higher tension, I went into a podcast episode with Chris and Troy to debate high tension versus low tension. We talk all about string materials, string best practices, all kinds of good stuff. So take a quick listen to this snippet and see which side you're on, high or low. Maybe you can just give me what you're looking for from your string bed, your string setup, and even what's like your ideal tension right now. And I guess it does depend if you're stringing in a 98 16x19 or a 98 18-20. So we can just kind of start there and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, Michelle, it's all about the pocketing, the dwell time,
No, I don't know, actually.
No, but for me, before I worked at Tennis Warehouse and I started stringing and experimenting, I used to use a Dunlop 200 18x20 pattern. It was a really soft racket. It was like low 60 flex. But when I first started using polys in that racket, I think I was using like the Gosen Polylon because it was like super cheap and durable, like a 16 gauge. And I actually used to have it strung at like 60 pounds. So it was pretty tight for a racket like that and dead, just because other players around me, or like the coach at the time, he was, pretty old school, like gut nylon. And, those were the tensions that were recommended. So I was like, all right, string it at 60 pounds, 61. And then from there, I started getting into like, a little bit better co-polys. I went from a Gosen Polylon to a Signum Pro Poly Plasma. And I was like, oh, this is nice, And then once I started working here and trying different stiffnesses of rackets, like that racket was really, really soft, not a wood racket, but essentially if you think of it that way, you could put metal wire in a wood racket because it's so flexible and it's still not really going to hurt your arm. So luckily I had a racket that was like really soft. And so I didn't have to learn the hard way and I didn't really get any arm injuries. But right away, like my first racket I reviewed was a K-Blade 98, and that had like a higher stiffness, I think like 67. And that's like when I was like, oh man, this is like definitely firmer than my racket. And so I started learning like, gradually drop the tension to find that like happy medium between, a stiffer frame like that and a stiff poly, to kind of find the balance. So that's kind of how I gradually started working my way down, and it was gradual. It was like, 60 down to 55. And then I was kind of like in the 55 to low 50 range for a while. And then kind of worked my way all the way down into the 40s. But Chris, I don't know, what was your kind of reason for starting to go down in tension?
So I was at the Cincinnati Open one year, and I was doing a video interview with Nate Ferguson of Priority One, who's Fed's customizer, stringer with Ron Yu over there. And we were in the, asking the questions that you do, and like, who's the highest tension, what's the lowest tension? And then they were like, Filippo Valandri was in here. And, I had to ask him whether it was a good job. I asked him whether it was pounds or kilos, because it was so low, it could have been kilos. And then I think he was down, if you convert it into pounds, he's like in the low 30s, like around 35 pounds. And I'm like, that's something I want to try. So when I came back to T-Dub after we had been filming, I was using the Volcal PowerBridge 10 mid at the time, and I started doing what I call the low tension experiment. And we did some blogs and some videos on it. There's a thread, you can probably still find it on the message board about it. And actually, when 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20. And then I was just like, the stringer machine only goes down to 10 pounds or whatever, did it 10 pounds. And I wanted to just go lower. So then I just pulled the string straight with my hand and clamped it. I don't even know why I clamped it. and then moved on. So I have strung pretty much about as low as you can put string in a racket. And if it's with a poly's so stiff, if you just get a coil of poly and try and just twist it, you'll feel how stiff that string is. You can actually play it quite well, remarkably, with hardly any tension in it at all. And it actually becomes, once you get really low, almost silent when you hit. So it's like cheating because the person can't hear how hard you're hitting the ball. And then also, and this is one thing I talked about with the T-Dub professor here, was usually the string vibration and the frame vibration are canceling each other out. And depending on the racket, you're going to find a low tension where they start to harmonize and they amplify, the string vibration and the frame vibration get together and they become super buzzy, and you're going to get tennis elbow in no time. So you got to watch out for that. When you start getting super low, like into the 20s, you'll find it's going to vary from racket to racket. You'll find a point where they're no longer canceling each other out. They're helping each other out. It's not an enjoyable feel.
I was going to say you should knock on the window and get the professor. Right. He might have to.
He's just next door.
Yeah, he's like, what are they talking about? He's going to have to do like a supplemental episode to this, because I have a lot of questions, and I know there are others out there that probably have similar questions, and I don't know if you can help debunk these questions or at least explain them. But here's a couple. I'm just going to start shooting them off. With a higher tension, will my string maintenance suffer more than at a lower tension? Because a lot of people say, like, if you have a racket strung at 62 pounds and you have a racket strung at 42 pounds, there's a greater amount that the 62 pounds needs to drop compared to the 42 pounds. I'm not good with science. You guys answer.
I mean, there's several ways to look at it. One is tension maintenance. The other is the shear factor of the string. So if you already have your string strung very tightly, there's a greater chance that you're reaching the point where it's just going to snap from stretching. If you shank it, so if you catch the ball really close to the frame, you can just, the shear force becomes too much for the string and it breaks. Whereas if it's a more flexible string or at a lower tension, it's still got a little bit of room to give and stretch. So it's less likely to shear. And then I think on the flip side of that, lower tension, the string is going to be moving around a bit more. It's going to, especially when you're brushing up, the strings can get displaced more, and then they snap back on a poly. So you're going to get a chance of increased notching, which could lead to premature,
Breakage.
like earlier breakage on the sweet spot area in the middle of the racket. So you got those two kind of factors going in as far as string breakage, and then I'll let Troy jump in and talk about tension maintenance.
Yeah, I would just think, like kind of what Chris was saying about the high tension. Just think of the string as when you string it tight like that, you're putting the string under more stress. It's constantly being pulled, that tension is really tight. So it's under a lot of stress, and that, would cause it, I would think, more likely to, break on, like he was saying, off center or whatever. As far as tension maintenance goes, I don't know if there's an exact, right or wrong answer, but say you string a poly, a monofilament at 70 pounds, whatever, you're already like putting it under a lot of stress and it's constantly being stretched out. I wouldn't think that there would be much more, for it to give. Whereas at a really low tension, you're not this, like I say, a really hand pull or whatever on the other extreme. The string's not, it's just kind of sitting. It's more like a net at that point. I don't think it would lose tension that fast because it's already really loose. But then again, I don't think it's being tested, so to speak, as much as the high tension would be. So I don't know. I think there might be like a sweet spot zone, but as far as which one's going to lose tension faster, I know exactly like the answers for that as far as string material and string construction, but I would think the one that's being stressed out more is going to get more damage done to it when you're hitting the ball.
We always love connecting with the tennis nerds out there, but in this episode, we connected with the OG tennis nerd, Jonas Eriksson, joined Troy and I for an episode, and we talked all about pro stock rackets. So we kind of dived in, we kind of get nitty gritty, we talk about what the pros are really swinging, and it's a fun chat. We always love connecting with to the tennis nerd, and I know you guys do too. This is one of the most popular episodes of the year. Take a little listen to part of our conversation. We wanted to talk to you about pro stock rackets. I'm going to lean on Troy to lead this discussion because he knows way more than me when it comes to pro stock rackets, and you have gotten your hands on many. And I guess the first question, that's probably the most common one that you get, is it really going to make me play better tennis if I'm using the actual racket that a pro's playing? And what are some of the differences that you see between the rackets that are available for all of us to buy and what the pros are hitting with?
It's mainly going to make you play worse tennis. That's usually what I feel when I'm playing with a pro stock racket. Because many of the pros, what they use, they're older, like junior rackets that are customized to their liking. So weight added, they're usually quite head heavy comparatively to more recreational retail rackets. They're not easy to use. They usually have quite small sweet spot, which works for them. They hit millions of tennis balls in a year, and so usually they're quite humbling to use a pro stock rackets. I played with Novak, Andes, not Rogers yet, but I could imagine it being somewhat similar. And you really feel like, oh wow, the feeling is nice, but it's nothing magical. It's just what works for them. And I think people get into this like thing that, oh, it's going to change my life. If I just could get 4 matched PT57As, my life is done. I'm going to reach the ITF tour now. And that's not how it works. I mean, it's fun to have these, fun to play with them. But then when you hit with them, I have Tommy Haas personal frame at home, which looks amazing, and something I hit from time to time, but it's just, it's demanding, right? It's the swing weight is right up there, 360s strong. And yeah, you feel like less of a player when you're playing with it, not more of a player. So I think people really have this perception that it's going to be, there's some magic going on that us mortals cannot buy at Tennis Warehouse or anywhere else. That if we could just get our hands on it, it would change our tennis life. But sadly, it's not the case. I can say from my own experience, there's no magic in there.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I've hit with a couple. I know that you've had, quite a variety of pro stocks to hit with, and I hit with a Rafa racket from I think it was back from like 2010 or 2011. It was like the GT cosmetic, and I know the swing weight was pretty beefy. It was like in the 355 range, I believe what it was. It wasn't like a super heavy racket. It was only like 3 points head light, so very close to that even balance. But yeah, it's just it's a different experience. Another one that I got to try was one of Lauren Davis's H22s when she was with Wilson. And definitely had it was a great filling frame, had a natural gut hybrid in it. And there was a lot of lead tape around the 3 and 9, 10 and 2 as well. So that plays a big part. But most of them are very demanding frames as far as the way they're set up. As far as maybe just expanding, like I know that, probably these frames are a lot more demanding and make you feel like it's hard to play with the racket. But as far as the feel goes, maybe just if you could give your thoughts on, like you said, the Tommy Haas racket or the PT57A, the Murray frame. And this, I know you said the sweet spot can be very small, but is there something about maybe the layup? It's hard to say what's inside, but that gives you that kind of like sublime feel, maybe more so than the material that you've noticed through a retail frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that they get accustomed to early, but it's also like some of these old school frames have a very plush, buttery feel. Like we talk about these words, both you and I do on my own channel. We talk about these words that kind of go over and over, but it's hard to describe them. It is something in that sensation when the racket pockets in the string bed that just feels very, very nice, and you get kind of addicted to it. But to hit it over and over again, if you're a lesser player or it's more demanding, you have to move better. So there's something to some of those old school frames. The PT57A is one of the best examples. I like the H22 is a great frame as well that many pros like, but it's not going to change your life, but it's going to be a nice hitting experience for sure. And I can really understand like Mario now playing with this, Prestige MP mold, the new one, but in the PT57A layup. So he still wants that frame that flexes. And I just talked to a guy who strung his racket in my podcast the other day, and it still flexes like his old racket, but it's just a bigger head size. So they can get these kind of magical in a way that they can say, I want this in this. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Right. So they go back to the drawing board. So that we can't get but it's still not the easiest to use for sure.
Yeah. That's the one thing I think some of the tennis fanatics, people on our message boards that crave these pro stocks is, a lot of them know that the rackets might be an older generation of a retail frame, but that thought that these manufacturers can tweak the layup, the stuff that you can't see, the layup of the frame, the direction of the graphite fibers. I know like Chris Edwards has been lucky enough to go to like the Head Factory and build or Wilson and make his own racket with the graphite tubes and everything. And, it's crazy how many thousands and thousands of different ways that they can tweak the angle of the fibers throughout the hoop to get it to flex different at different points, So that's something that's very kind of like a mysterious thing that I think some people kind of get stuck on, oh my God, the layup of the frame. So
no, and it's a fascinating topic. I mean, and I hope I've been scheduled to go to the Kendelbach factory in Austria like twice now, but it's been COVID every time. It's a different wave of COVID.
Oh, no.
Hopefully now we are getting into a place where I could go there, because it would be really amazing for a fan of these old school frames. I'm a big lover of these old school rackets, and it's so nice to see how they will actually manufacture it, and so much engineering that actually goes into this. Sometimes these guys that actually come up with the molds and the layups, they don't get enough respect and enough recognition, because it's quite a lot of work that goes in finding something that plays well for a big audience, or just for that one player, whether it's Novak or it's a big group that for the Clash or whatever you want to sell, to the audience. So kudos to the guys who actually come up with these layups and molds.
For sure, those R&D guys, they spend years dedicating research, and like by the time you see a new launch of rackets, they're already working on a racket that's launching in 3 years. So it's pretty wild. They're awesome, and they're so informed, and they've been in the sport for so long. Most of them, I would say, it's pretty cool. Last but not least, it's always fun for me to connect with the designers in our sport, the people who are spending hours and years researching and creating what we love to wear or use on the court. And in this episode, I had a chance to talk with the global team from Adidas about the AvaCourt shoe. Now, if you've watched any of our reviews on this shoe or even listened to this podcast already, you're going to quickly know this shoe is one of my favorites of the year. They designed it specifically with the female athlete in mind. But what I love is they took feedback from players like you and me, not just the pro players. So they really did an amazing job launching this shoe. It has quickly become one of the most popular women's shoes on the market for 2022. They keep adding really fun colors, and I'm really excited to share part of this episode with you guys. So this episode is dedicated to this new shoe, Avacourt, and it is a women's specific shoe. And I just want to get straight into it. You guys have made a women's specific shoe in the past, and there's one right now that is a favorite amongst many, many, many women out there. The Stella Court, previously the Stella Barricade. I know every female tennis player at Tennis Warehouse has that shoe in their top 3. Talk to me about the process of coming together with a new shoe for women and updating the Stella Court to the Avacourt.
Yeah, no, it's maybe I take this one. I think or have a first shot at it. It's great to hear the love for the Stella Court shoe, and that is matched by many, including ourselves. And it's definitely a space that we feel really, really passionate and confident about, having kind of owned that for so long. And it's definitely continues to be a winner for many on and off the court, may I say. So, I mean, as you know, we have a significant lineup of tennis shoes in our portfolio, you know, that reaches the entire spectrum from whatever a player needs on the court, whether it's stability, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, a lightweight, fast shoe with Ubersonic. And on all the shoes that we have in our portfolio, we have a dual gender approach. So we have making sure that the shoe is accessible for both female and male players. And what is also important here is that all of the women's shoes of the entire portfolio are tailored to women's specific needs. So we always put a lot of effort in making sure that the fit of the shoe is built on a women's specific last, that color, heights, material choices, abrasion zones, that adjustments are made on all of our shoes in the portfolio to women's athletes' needs. When we talk about Avacourt, this is really where we know that a lot of female tennis athletes, a lot of learnings actually prefer to find a shoe and wear a shoe on court that somehow sits in the middle of that spectrum. You know, you have Barricade is a very supportive, confident, stable product. And on the other side with Supersonic, we have a super fast shoe in the lineup. But we know that for a lot of female players, the sweet spot is really in that middle, you know, where there is not such a preference or need for going one or the other way. And the learnings from Stella and the love that the shoe has been enjoying, you know, is one part of the formula. But at the same time, you know, over the course of the years, we've been able to collect a lot of additional data, insights, working with our pro athletes in particular, doing research on what are female athletes' specific needs, desires, and preferences on court. And that really all laddered up in the end where we felt so strongly about having all that additional insight and in it being time to update that space and put all forces together and create Avacourt. So really happy with having all the ammunition that's gone into it.
Nice. I really like what you said, I know there was a ton of research done, and I would love to hear even more about what you guys have learned through the research process. But even hearing that you did so much research, hearing that women really do like that stable shoe, but they also like that light and comfort, and then like being able to have the sense to be like, okay, let's put something in the middle, because so often we see these lines of shoes and they match up men, women, men, women, men, women. And that's great. And a lot of times women can find success with one of those options, but they might not even know that something better exists. And this is like a hybrid of exactly what women are craving. That wraps up 2022. I'm super excited for 2023. Tennis is in for a good year. There are going to be tons of new rackets, shoes, apparel. I think the pros are gearing up for a good year as well. So excited to catch preseason down in Australia and jump right into that Australian Open. Hopefully we'll be bringing you tons of fun content on the podcast and throughout all of the things that we do at Tennis Warehouse. Always open to feedback or things that you want to hear more. Email us at podcast@tennis-warehouse.com, and wishing you guys all a very, very happy new year and amazing happy holidays and all the best for 2023. Happy hitting.